So Reed Timmer, the most popular storm chaser, has just come out with a documentary, Never Stop Chasing, and it's playing in the city this afternoon at 3:45 on this Tuesday. I decided that I haven't made a second channel video in a while, so I'm gonna go in and go see it. And as a YouTuber, I guess, that talks about weather and storm chasing sometimes, I figured I have somewhat of a reasonable opinion to give, and we'll give it at the end of this. But in the meantime, we gotta hop on the bus and get through the Lincoln Tunnel and into the city. So let's do that. Live from my couch post Never Stop Chasing film. I changed too. Sorry about the continuity error. But let's get into it. So there's going to be a little bit of spoilers here, but I assume if you're watching the second channel of June 1st, you know weather history, and I presume you have a pretty good understanding of Reed Timmer's past and his different intercepts that he's had over the years. But the main thing that I want to get into here is just kind of like the way they went about the arc. Ken Cole produced this. He's the same guy that was behind Tornado Chasers and all that. So, clearly familiar with Timmer and all that. So that makes it very easy, I imagine, to kind of approach this from a very, well-structured standpoint as a filmmaker. But I like how they start with El Reno and kind of an alternative edit to that Tornado Chasers episode with, Reed and Team Dominator's perspective of the El Reno event. And it flash forwards to 2024 and kind of the aftermath of that, particularly in the Twist X context, which, is kind of a hard pill to swallow and kind of introduces this tone of the day, storm chasing lost its innocence type of thing. So you kind of have that opening context there, but from there it does this flip-flop thing between Reed's adventures in 2024, but also Reed's, coming up, starting, with 99 Bridge Creek and on up through that. So it does that kind of back and forth thing while Reed is, in present day, if you will, chasing things. So that's kind of the overall narrative structure of the film. And you're introduced to people like, some of the older members of Team Dominator, like Mike Scantlin and Connor McCrory, and some of the newer folks involved, like Edgar O'Neill and Local Man Weather. So, you kind of have these different characters that are, along in the story as well. The main thing that I want to kind of talk about, the things that I really liked personally, I thought the actual moments of near close encounters with tornadoes and, with the 2024, the more modern season stuff that the documentary crew is really documenting was very well done. And I think that the, kind of that immersive aspect of it is probably some of the best I've seen of, you really get an understanding, I think, of the psyche and the real high energy moment that, I think a lot of people are drawn to when it comes to Reed Timmer. You feel the adrenaline in the moment, I would say, better than I think any other media. And it's about as immersive as you get, especially in that theater setting with the big speakers. And it helps too that the sound design definitely aids in that. There's a little bit of, SFX kind of going on in the background, but it's not overbearing. I know sometimes some of those, when there's too much added sound effects to some of these tornado intercepts, that I know for me, it kind of takes me out of it, but I didn't think it was overbearing. But the scoring and all that really adds to it without taking you completely out of the moment and feeling like it's too much. So from that perspective, it was really awesome. I think the other thing that I really liked about it was actually Connor McCrory. And he's a very stoic presence, very cool, calm, collected, and very, very, I think logical under pressure. And I think he's a very much unsung hero in this, and I think has one of the most touching and beautiful moments and heartbreaking moments in the film. He shares a personal story that apparently he hasn't really publicly talked about much, that is very fitting and, quite honestly, I think is the highlight of emotion in the film. But the other thing too, from the emotional perspective, I would say that there are some of these moments, particularly with kind of commitment to storm chasing. I think there could have been a little bit more leaning into that. I think just like how much of his life he's actually dedicated, because I think there's almost this thing of like you don't really get a full appreciation of how much one has to put into this type of craft in order to become the best at it. And I think if you can kind of get into more of that level of sacrifice, I think that would have enhanced the film and really drove home just how unique of a character Reed Timmer really is. So from that perspective, I think there could have been a little bit more there. And I think the other thing that I want to highlight there too, I think there's naturally going to be some criticism with some of the driving behaviors shown in the film. And I credit Ken Cole for not censoring that type of stuff out. Granted, I guess you could see it in a live stream if you really wanted to and dive through those moments. But, there is some questionable things there that I think could be, pointed at as reckless and possibly endangering others. But besides the point, I don't think that's any secret that exists in storm chasing as it is. And there's going to be some questionable things done in order to get close to tornadoes. And you can debate the ethics of that as you will. The other thing is that I liked in terms of like the more challenging perspective as a documentary, like I think there needs to be sometimes these more, challenging perspectives. I liked the perspective of Dr. Joshua Werman, Howie Bluestein, and Tim Marshall, these kind of establishment type people in this film, and kind of calling a little bit of criticism towards the scientific aspect of Team Dominator, which obviously the rocket stuff and all that is pretty interesting. But I do think like Werman brings up a very excellent point that what is that doing to further the field of science? We know tornadoes are windy. What is that type of work doing in the long run? There's definitely scientific questions behind that. So at the end of the day, though, it's definitely a film that you should probably watch, and I highly suggest seeing it in theaters because I think the immersive aspect on the big screen and plus the sound. There's a really cool moment with well remastered footage of the Ellis tornado intercept from 2007, and particularly with the sound design in that, I think is a really cool moment and one of my favorite moments in the thing. So if you want to go watch it in theaters, do it while it's still in theaters. I highly recommend it, but I imagine there'll be a streaming option at some point. So overall, thumbs up from me. Great job by Ken Cole and the production people behind it. And never stop chasing.